like black smoke, the Black Death's journey. We see death coming into our midst like black smoke, wrote the poet Ieuan Gethin when plague invaded Wales in March 1349. This rootless phantom, which has no mercy, was especially frightening for those who witnessed it because they knew it was somehow contagious, but no one could halt or explain its relentless spread across Europe. Eastern beginnings. The earliest evidence of the Black Death lies in a cemetery in what was once a prosperous town near Lake Issyk-Kul on the fabled Silk Road in Central Asia. An unusually large number of graves there are dated 1338 and 1339. 3 headstones mentioning the cause of death provide a clue about why so many people died. The plague. Did the Black Death originate near Issyk-Kul? No one knows for sure. Most medieval writers say that the plague began in the East. They name places like Cathay, China, India, and Turkey. Modern historians agree that the epidemic started in Asia, more specifically somewhere on the central steppes or in the Himalayan lowlands on the border of India and China. In both regions, the plague bacterium Yersinia pestis has long thrived among wild marmots, ground squirrels, and gerbils. On the move. How did the disease travel from wild rodents to humans? According to early accounts, before the Black Death broke out, earthquakes, floods, and famines devastated Asia. One theory is that these disasters drove wild animals into villages and towns in search of food. Fleas then spread plague germs to rats. When rats died of the plague, their fleas hunted for new hosts. Since rats nested in the adobe sun-dried brick walls and thatched roofs of medieval houses, the next meal for these fleas often came from people. The disease spread more easily if an affected person's lungs started filling up with plague bacteria. Then every cough and sneeze spewed germs into the air, spreading pneumonic plague directly to others. If they are not among the lucky few who recover, people and rats soon die of the plague, but infected fleas can lurk in a rat's nests, barnyard manure, or bedding and clothing for many months without eating. A medieval writer was not far from wrong when he wrote that even the houses or clothes of the victims could kill. Cloth, grain, furs, and hides kept in rat-infested warehouses soon became delayed-action plague bombs waiting to go off. An account on how 4 soldiers learned the hard way about contaminated goods. Looting houses in a deserted town, they stole a fleece off a bed and later slept under it. They were dead by morning. Commercial caravans, Mongol armies, and other wayfarers carried the Black Death in their baggage as they crisscrossed Asia. By 1345, it had traveled from Issyk-Kul to Sarai and Astrakhan, the major cities of the Golden Horde, a part of the Mongol Empire that is today southwestern Russia. From Asia to the Mediterranean. At the time, Italian merchants from Genoa and Venice had established trading posts at Kaffa, a city on the Crimean Peninsula that juts out into the Black Sea. Since the mid-1200s, their galleys had transported Asian horses, furs, and slaves to Syria and Egypt, and silks and spices to Italy. When plague began to spread to the Crimea, many of the Europeans tried to escape by sea, but the Black Death sailed with them. The following summer, plague broke out in Constantinople. From there, across the Mediterranean region. That fall, ships brought the plague to Alexandria, Egypt, one arriving with only 45 of its original crew of 332 men still alive. Another fleet came to Messina, Sicily, its crew so ill that a chronicle reports that the men had sickness clinging to their very bones. The epidemic reached Genoa on New Year's Eve, 1347, aboard 3 galleys laden with spices from the east. On discovering that many seamen were sick, the Genoese chased the ships from the port with burning arrows and engines of war. Plague-ridden rats, however, had already jumped ship. The galleys sailed off along the coast of France, still hoping to find a place to sell their deadly merchandise. Following the trade routes, Following 14th century trade routes, the Black Death swept across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. After it assaulted the seaports, smaller boats carried it to neighboring towns and to river ports far inland. It could not be stopped. Although some towns refused entry to travelers from infected areas, and people learned to mistrust plague goods, few noticed the dead rats, and no one thought of the fleas. Reports of the plague in 1348 show how the circles of infection widened. In the east, it hit Cyprus, Aleppo, Damascus, Jerusalem, and even pilgrims visiting Mecca. From Genoa and Venice, it crept down the Italian boot toward Florence and Rome. Going west, it struck Marseille, Tunis, and Barcelona. By June, the epidemic was storming Paris, causing the French royal family to flee to Rouen, where it soon followed. That summer, it overran Germany, Poland, and Hungary, and crossed the Channel to southern England. Winter did not slow its progress. The weather was unusually mild and wet, perhaps warm enough for fleas living on house rats to remain active. Huddled indoors, people were also exposed to air contaminated both by the suffering from pneumonic plague and by the dust from rodent droppings. As the disease moved northward through England, citizens of Lincoln wrote wills at 30 times the normal annual rate. At first, the Scots, that's the Scottish, avoided the plague, but when they assembled troops to invade England, pestilence struck, perhaps imported by soldiers from France. The Black Death landed in Scandinavia on a ship carrying wool from London to Norway. The ship had run aground near Bergen because all the crew had died. From there, plague spread across Norway into Sweden and across the Baltic Sea to Russia. The journey ends. In 1315, plague peaked in Scotland and Scandinavia, while in southern Spain it killed King Afonso XI of Castile. The following year, it stretched to Greenland, where it helped wipe out the Norwegian colony, and to Yemen at the tip of the Arabian Peninsula. In 1353, it closed in on Moscow, killing both the Patriarch of the Russian Church and the Grand Duke of Muscovy. Finally, the Black Death petered out somewhere in Kiev, that's in Russia, having come almost full circle back to Kaffa. During its long rampage, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East died. No natural disaster before or since has caused such devastation of human life over such a large area. It was one of the greatest catastrophes in human history.